power of where enables governments to make data-based decisions and determine types of interventions. It enables businesses to make strategic decisions and plan resource allocation intelligently. Geospatial knowledge has touched the lives of billions, making it more connected and comfortable. With new age technology influencing geospatial adoption across user segments, what is the growth trajectory of geospatial knowledge? How does the new age technology influence geospatial adoption? Are governments and businesses ready to scale up geospatial adoption for wider, more pervasive outcomes? What is the paradigm shift required to achieve this? This is where geospatial knowledge infrastructure comes into picture. Geospatial knowledge infrastructure is powered by real-time analytics, automation and data capture and sharing, set within a decentralized system in a collaborative environment, delivering outcomes based on knowledge-based products and solutions. Let's uncover the value, relevance, and connectivity of geospatial knowledge infrastructure with fundamentals of next-generation digital economy to make our world safer, prosperous, and sustainable.
Hello everyone, very warm welcome to webinar on geospatial knowledge infrastructure. I hope you're staying safe and your family and friends are healthy. Thank you very much for taking time to join us, a group of organizations who are co-hosting this event. It's a big occasion. It's a big occasion because geospatial knowledge infrastructure is a collaborative process of ideation of how geospatial community can play its role in shaping the next generation digital society. And I'm very proud to say that things begin over a cup of coffee. I do recall last September when myself and Greg Scott were in Rome near the station sitting for a coffee in the afternoon, and we were probably compelled to spend some more time because it was heavily raining. And that's when we started talking about the future of geospatial community, geospatial profession, as well as what's happening around us. And what's happening around us is the kind of innovation, technology, digital, what we are seeing, we are experiencing, and what a better way to actually get into, or rather in some way forced into being digital by COVID-19, like we are today. We are joined by more than almost 1,000 people from 75 plus countries sitting in their locations and kind of socializing some ideas and thinking about how can we collectively make a difference. And that's the kind of philosophy we were discussing about. And then we came up with this term that we need to think about something which is kind of geospatial knowledge. We have to move from data to knowledge, and we have to move from capacity to infrastructure. And that's what is the background of geospatial knowledge infrastructure. The rationale behind the whole initiative of geospatial knowledge infrastructure is being driven by the fourth industrial revolution, or you call it as a digital age. What happens in the fourth industrial revolution is that we are surrounded by a host of sensors. Those sensors are on the ground, they are in the air, and they are also in the space, and some of them are below the ground as well. And host of these sensors are collecting data in the real time. And every data is representing something about some place or any activity which is taking place in some place. So it has a geospatial connotation. So we have sensors which is collecting data. Then we also have artificial intelligence. the magnitude of data which we have today cannot be processed by human beings. And we have the artificial intelligence and big data technologies which is helping us to process that information, process that data, and make that data and convert that data into a piece of knowledge. But then that piece of knowledge, how do we communicate? And that's where we have the telecommunication revolution in the form of 5G, which allows our devices to actually get connected from anywhere in any part of the world, be not necessarily be wired, it can be wireless. And this 5G kind of revolution is giving you the power of not only communicating, but also processing at the device level. That is what is the kind of digital information age we are in. But when we talk about this digital information or digital age, a very important point comes in: where is the sustainability? How do we use these technologies for sustainable development? What are the connotations? What are the implications of this technology innovation and technology revolution for sustainable development? And that is such a critical, important topic at this moment. And in view of this, if you go back to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, you will find a direct references at many places about the power of Earth observation and geospatial information in monitoring and implementation of SDG goals. And that is where our partnership with the United Nations is very, very important and very, very critical. So I would like to thank Stephen Swinefest, Greg Scott, and the UNSD team who came forward and who very willingly agreed to collaborate with us and number of other partners which my colleagues will be talking about in this process to develop a kind of collaborative platform which talks about geospatial knowledge infrastructure and its role in economy, society, and environment. But when we are talking about advancing this role of geospatial knowledge in the economy, society, and environment, a very important aspect is what is the level of preparedness, what is the level of readiness of countries in terms of digital infrastructure, in terms of geospatial infrastructure, in terms of capacity infrastructure. And in every age of industrialization, or what we call about 4IR, it's very important that we should not make this technology only for developed countries. It's very important that we should not let grow the digital divide and conversion of that digital divide in geospatial divide. And that is the responsibility of the geospatial community, that we should focus on involving and communicating and working together with the countries across the world to develop a geospatial knowledge infrastructure. In fact, geospatial knowledge infrastructure is something which will help leapfrog to many of these countries to move from A level to probably B, C, D, E level, and they don't necessarily have to go through the whole process again and again. So this is an opportunity for a lot of us to leapfrog and start using this concept for implementing geospatial strategy in those countries. So that's the kind of rationale, but the objective of this project is to align geospatial technology with the frontier technologies and also create a collaborative partnership within and amongst the geospatial data ecosystem players, be it topographical mapping, geological mapping, forestry mapping, or earth observation, or hydrography, or SDI. All these thematic mapping organizations, they bring a very rich value on table for a geospatial knowledge infrastructure. And in this partnership project, we have the participation of all these kinds of institutions across the world who are co-sharing their experiences to build this concept. And then also looking at making an assessment of the role of geospatial into the world economy and society. Make an assessment. What is our role? How can we make much more meaningful difference? How can we really showcase our comprehensive value? How can we work with the mainstream political, economic, and social leadership to project as well as campaign for aligning geospatial with mainstream decision making? Third aspect of this is to define and redefine the role of national mapping organizations. They are becoming very, very important. They are the custodians of the geospatial information. They are the policy makers. And that's where we need their support. That's where we need them to empower themselves to work with the national governments and regional institutions and develop geospatial policy frameworks for tomorrow. And at the same time, looking at how can we help transform them? How can we create mechanisms to transform the national mapping organizations and make them commit to play a leading role in national, regional, and global development? That's the kind of background of geospatial knowledge infrastructure. And I'm very happy that today we shall be presenting the first discussion draft to the larger audience, to the geospatial community worldwide. And that will be done through a group of 3 panel discussions represented by our partner network. And they will be co-sharing, and they will be sharing as well as co-sharing our ideas about geospatial knowledge infrastructure. So this is the first effort to open the dialogue beyond our partners. And I would like to very much welcome and appreciate participants in this section to share their questions, they share their ideas in the chat box, as well as participate and contribute. Not only today, but if you see an opportunity for you to send your inputs back to us, we would very much welcome. And this is just the beginning of the socialization process of the geospatial knowledge infrastructure. And over next 1 year or so, we'll keep on engaging with you as we make progress. And with this, I would like to once again thank our partners, and especially United Nations Statistics Department, for co-hosting this project as well as this webinar. To provide a broader outline of geospatial knowledge infrastructure, I would invite my colleague John Kedar, who is the strategic advisor at Geospatial Media and Communications. Well, John is very well known in our fraternity. He has been with the UK Defense Ordnance Survey, and he has been part of several international initiatives in terms of capacity development transformation. And I really thank him for helping us. He's been very kind, and he's been putting a lot of effort in developing this concept. And I really thank his commitment to the geospatial world and his contribution in this field. So John, with these words, I invite you to make your presentations.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Sanjay, and good day to everyone, wherever you might be. Many friends, of course, around the world. And I'm going to introduce you to the concept of geospatial knowledge infrastructure. We colloquially refer to it as GKI, and I reiterate that several times just to help you. But I do draw your attention to the fact that there is now this discussion paper that I'm going to talk to online, and at the end you'll see the link, and I'm sure the link will be well publicized. And as Sanjay said, we really welcome everyone's feedback on that. Next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so why a new concept? And Sanjay talked to this a little bit, but let me take you through what we're saying in the paper. The fourth industrial revolution, sometimes called the second digital age, is absolutely changing the world and our lives, all of our lives, more comprehensively even than the first industrial revolution. It's very fast moving, it's very different, and governments, businesses, civil society and academia, we're all struggling to understand what it is, what it means, and let alone keep up. We're seeing an absolute explosion in data, as Sanjay talked about, real-time data from sensors of space, above and below sea level, social media data, Internet of Things data, other crowdsourcing. We're witnessing a whole new data and knowledge economy in creation, worth trillions of dollars globally. Increases in computing power, geospatial applications, advanced analytics, and AI techniques such as machine learning are creating massive new opportunities for better decisions, better services, better experiences, and automation. Users and decision makers are looking at us, our community, to deliver this step change in digital transformation. For example, the Secretary General of the United Nations has called for better use of digital transformation, technology and data to help achieve Vision 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And at geospatial agency level, leaders are under increasing pressure to deliver up-to-date, detailed, accurate, high-quality and accessible data. And we must remember another key factor of the fourth industrial revolution. Increasingly, there is no human in the loop. Machine-to-machine data and analytics mining, the analytics themselves, automated decisions and automated actions are already here. From the automated vehicles we're starting to see being tested around the world to health applications. So automation, machine-to-machine, and knowledge. And I want to turn now to just look at knowledge because, as Sanjay says, it's a geospatial knowledge infrastructure. This pyramid's probably very familiar to most of you. It's the knowledge management pyramid, and it demonstrates the relationship between data at the bottom and knowledge and wisdom at the top. And as we move up the pyramid from data to wisdom, we move from knowing the what and where it is to the how, the who, the why, and the when. And that leads to much better decisions and higher value. Automatic processing of data to give information is commonplace, but we're now reaching that inflection point where that cognition can be done by machine, which takes the delivery of knowledge onto a whole new plane, as we can draw upon the data, the information, the existing knowledge across the whole web. Without where and when, though, that cognition is quite difficult, and that's why geospatial as a whole takes this step forward to help that cognition, to help deliver knowledge. We could call it, if we wanted, geocognition. This slide really looks at, on the top, the progression, if you like, of digitalization, the digital journey. And it's a journey from left to right. Some of us, me for example, can remember the left-hand side, paper memos, carbon paper, typing pools even. Others listening in here will only have experienced the dark blue box, the modern day web, and will be leading the charge into the next stage of our digital journey, which is on the right there, Web 3.0, semantic web, and so on and so forth. At the bottom, we have the progression of the geospatial journey, analog mapping, digital cartography, and so on. And it's not that one box supersedes another, rather that we see a broadening of geospatial over time that gives society greater benefit. And nations are at different stages of this journey. But the right-hand box, the blue box there, the integrated geospatial information framework, is very topical at the moment and is intended to help all nations provide and use geospatial information. But that leaves us with a grey box with a question mark on. And this is where we need to work and think about, and Sanjay and Greg started this journey, as Sanjay said, back in September last year, how our community enables the next stage of the digital journey, the wider fourth industrial revolution, automation, knowledge on demand, and so on. And this is where the geospatial knowledge infrastructure comes in. It's not a replacement or a competitor to GIS, SDIs, or to the IGIF. Rather, it's aiming to define how we continue to broaden to meet the demands of automation and knowledge, whilst also seeing how we as a community capitalise on these great new opportunities offered by the fourth industrial revolution. The fact that the two journeys shown on this slide start to come together, not as graphically as I'd like, but start to come together, is deliberate. So what is GKI trying to do? GKI integrates location, fourth industrial revolution technologies and cognition to deliver trusted understanding, knowledge, decisions and automations. And as shown on the previous slide, it aims to move the geospatial sector much closer to the wider digital ecosystem and into knowledge delivery. So let's think of some examples, and we won't use COVID-19, Sanjay's mentioned that, but climate change is absolutely real, happening now, and will have massive financial and humanitarian consequences. Businesses are seeking to understand the impact upon themselves and their individual property portfolio from the very real reduction of property value in flood zones, future flood zones, to modelling to decide where to invest in new infrastructure. Another example, automated vehicles need to know whether it's safe to drive down a muddy lane through puddles and so on. Another example, citizens asking a question of Siri, wanting to know whether the house they're looking at is good value for them given their personal circumstances. Competitors in the financial industry want millisecond advantage by knowing best possible global predictions of everything from crop disease to individual business prospects. And governments want to really know about the potential value and impacts of offshore mining and fishing concessions before awarding contracts and model how to balance the benefits and impacts. Now, all of those use cases use location, use a wide mixture of data sources, use cognition through advanced analytics, and other 4IR technologies to derive knowledge, whether for human or machine. So that's what GKI is about enabling. It has a series of goals. Yes, all good documents have goals, don't they? And they're listed here and in the paper. Geolocated data as the new norm. In other words, where possible, all data should have associated location. And the value of that location should be understood. The financial, economic, social value that geospatial brings to data should be understood by decision makers. The geospatial sector and its data and technologies are fully part of the wider digital and knowledge ecosystem, this merging of pathways. The geospatial cognition is at the heart of predictive analytics and modelling. Fourthly, it's user-focused. We really must focus on the users more and more, with collaboration and innovative geospatial sector reaching broadly out and across all sectors of industry. Fifthly, government policies and strategies are integrated and optimized across the full technology, business and data spectrum. And lastly, number 6, the scaffolding of the digital world is actually a continuously updated set of fundamental geospatial information. Now, this diagram I'm going to explain for the second half of my presentation, but I just advise you that we shall have some polling coming up on screen through this, so please do take part as you see that come up. I'm going to focus a little bit on what GKI includes. Don't try and read the detail on here, I'll take you through in a little bit more in simpler slides in a second. But the dark blue circles, the 6 circles in the center, are the principles of GKI. And then around the outside, we have 6 elements, all with a number of components clustered around them. And in the discussion paper that's online, each of these components is described in a couple of sentences, more from an outcomes perspective than the technical aspects of them. Naturally, some of these elements and components are already here in some countries or being pursued. Some require global effort and consensus, and others are components that businesses and individual agencies can take on now. Let's take a quick journey around this diagram. Here we go, participate in poll has come up. So, the principles, and again, I think they're self-explanatory. We don't know how the next 10 years will develop. Just look back at the last. And we don't know what shocks lie en route. So we need GKI to be an infrastructure that's enduring and therefore must be innovative, dynamic, and agile. No one business or agency can deliver the answers, the data, or the analytics. The strength of the web is that it's decentralized and it leads to collaboration. Two principles there. It's also about improving currency and being real-time and predictive. That increases value. And the focus is on knowledge here. And for that to be the case, then we must really focus on the user-centric, decision-maker-centric. The 6 elements, and I take you through them in no particular order. First, foundation data infrastructure. The term foundation is deliberate. It's not just about national geospatial agencies delivering fundamental geospatial information, but it embraces all sorts of other foundation information that has location as part of it. Weather data, statistics data, land registration, crop types, national spatial development plans. But it's not just about the data, it's about the approach to foundation data too. And it sees foundation agencies moving up the value chain. The second of the elements aims to bring the geospatial dimension into the wider data ecosystem. From individual companies to global institutions, location is fundamental to what they do, whether it's from a data perspective or an analytics perspective. And it will be across the web. It will be from all sorts of places. Standards will have to change. We'll need to be able to seamlessly integrate into the web, into business and government systems and enterprises. And further development of the positioning infrastructure and greater assurance are both here too. The positioning infrastructure, without it, of course, very little of this can happen. Governments have a major part to play in setting the frameworks for economic growth, social well-being, and environmental protection, and balancing citizen responsibilities and their rights. But the fourth industrial revolution, the age we're coming into very quickly, will require new, different, more dynamic, integrated policies, enhanced rationality, and it will change the way governments have to work. So as a really simple example, it's absolutely sensible to align space, industrial, data, innovation and education policies in a country. It's not always the case, I think many of us know. The industry ecosystem, the fourth element. Today's big beneficiaries are the disruptors, the innovators, and the investors that invest in that disruption. And that's all led by industry. More and more industries will use geospatial information and analytics in their solutions. And this gives a real opportunity for the geospatial sector to further migrate into the wider knowledge, data, technology ecosystem, focusing on services and improved user experiences. And I just draw your attention to one component here. The global village is very important in a sustainable world, thinking across local citizens, local businesses, and global businesses, and how they work together in the future. Applications, analytics, and modeling are in GKI because they are, and they provide, the very cognition that allows predictive knowledge. Integrating many forms of data and analytics provides that knowledge in the same way, and in the same way that data should be easily findable in the web, so too should the analytical tools that we need to bring into play. So data and analytics, both out there, we draw upon them to solve our particular problems in our time frame. And lastly, partnerships and collaborations. Now, recognizing that partnerships are quite difficult amongst competitors, but actually very few organizations can deliver all the elements necessary in the knowledge environment in a competitive digital world, certainly not where high value is sought. So partnerships and collaborations will become increasingly normal in our world. And it may be that collaboration brings separate benefits to both parties, perhaps through geospatial knowledge co-creation, which is one of the components here, where, for example, a vehicle fleet owner helps maintain the very national fundamental geospatial information that his company relies upon for operations, that co-creation. One of the questions we hear a lot is why and how does this relate to the IGIF? One of the great achievements over the last 2 years by our community, led by Greg, has been the delivery of the United Nations Integrated Geospatial Information Framework. And some of you will have attended last month's virtual high-level forum, which introduced the implementation guide. Now, it will be discussed later today, but it's important to stress that GKI is not a competitor, but complementary, and actually may support the future development of the framework as GKI concepts that we talk about today increasingly become good practice over the next years. And this slide shows that the 9 pathways of the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, actually all of the components that I've talked to or illustrated, all of them fit somewhere in on the IGIF pathways. And if we find that what we're suggesting does develop new practices, new ways of working, then in time that can help the IGIF develop too. But I also want to draw one further link with UN-GGIAN work, and that's the draft 3rd edition of the United Nations report on future trends in geospatial information management, which will be out this summer, the final version. It's been an important reference in helping us to understand GKI. So the point I'm making is we are a partner in this, it's not competitive. As I close, I want to draw your attention to the discussion paper. We have a commitment in it towards a sustainable world where everyone and the environment benefit from geospatial knowledge. And as Sanjay said, we've got to take the opportunities for less developed nations to leapfrog using some of the GKI technologies and components as we progress on our journey. And it is a journey. The paper's online now. Our objective is to get a discussion going, as Sanjay said, a discussion with the partners of this project, with organizations and people from across the world, and with all of you. It's a journey, and today marks a point that we effectively start to define the route to our future. So please do feel free to help define that route. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for taking us through the components of GKI. It is certainly interesting to know that GKI enables real-time geospatial data capture, processing, and analysis, having an analytical capability to provide knowledge for delivery of citizen services. There are numerous questions from the audience that are coming, but before we take those, let me ask you a few questions that are coming to my mind. You have shown 6 elements of GKI. So do you see any particular element as more important than others in delivering GKI?
Thanks, Anamika. I think it depends where you sit in your perspective, to be honest. But from my perspective, I think it's the element that looks at the geospatial dimension to the wider data ecosystem is the most significant. Ultimately, because we must continue to get closer to that wider digital knowledge and ecosystem and be part of it. So I think that's probably the most important.
You know, the term spatial knowledge infrastructure has been written about in a number of contexts, and we have been listening to it and received much attention in Australia. Is there a difference between GKI, that is geospatial knowledge infrastructure, and spatial knowledge infrastructure?
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting question, and our colleagues in Australia have done some great work looking at spatial knowledge infrastructures. To me, the geospatial knowledge infrastructure is far broader. The spatial knowledge infrastructure is about knowledge on demand. It's about satisfying a very real need. But we try and take geospatial knowledge infrastructure wider. So how does the geospatial industry also benefit from all the 4IR technologies and so on? So it's broader, if you like, but the SKI, the spatial knowledge infrastructure work, is very much part of what we've written into GKI.
One question that is coming is, what are the prerequisites for the transition to GKI?
Yeah, very good question. The prerequisites, I think we'll sort of consider them a little bit during this year. One of the things that's not being mentioned, but in January next year, there'll be a report produced which takes all of the discussions we have this year with you and with our partners, and it takes those discussions and it will lead to a report around GKI, which will be produced in January next year. And in amongst that, we'll have also looked at a number of countries and where they are on that GKI journey. So the prerequisites, if you like, will be defined as we go through the year. And it's not going to be a case of you have to have done all of this and you're suddenly GKI. It's a journey. So a lot of the elements and components are something, it's a direction of travel, and we'll continue to follow them as we go through. So you don't suddenly become GKI. It's an absolute journey. But we will have a better idea on that as we look and discuss with countries over the next few months.
John, there are many questions that are coming to me as well as from the audience, but you know, we are short of time. So probably we'll take up those questions and have further discussion offline or maybe some other occasion. So thank you so much, John, for an interesting insight. Let's now understand from the various panel discussions on different aspects that are key to GKI. So our first panel is on integration of UN-IGIF and GKI. UN-GGIM has developed the integrated geospatial information framework, and GKI, as understood by John's presentation that I could gather, ensures that geospatial data, services, knowledge meet the requirement of tomorrow's, that is next generation society, solving tomorrow's challenges with tomorrow's tool, definitely. And GKI builds upon the framework of IGIF, focusing from the user demand perspective. So let's understand the aspect of the integration of IGIF with GKI from our panelists in details on this. And the moderator for this panel is Dr. Derek Clark, advisor, World Geospatial Industry Council, that is WGIC. And the panelist for this panel discussion is Mr. Rolando Ocampo from the Statistics Division, Economic Commission for Latin America and Caribbean from United Nations, Dr. Zafar Shadiq Mohammed Gauss, the Executive Director, Strategic Consulting and International Relations from Spatial Vision Australia. We had one panelist, Mr. Francois Hobida, who is not able to join because of the connectivity issue at his place, but definitely we will have his perspective offline. So, Derek, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Anamika. Thank you for the introduction. And hello to all the participants from all the various time zones. So as Anamika has just mentioned, we are going to have a panel discussion on the integration of the UN-IGIF and the GKI. And there are the three, well, there were to be three panelists, but one unfortunately cannot connect, as Annemieke has just mentioned. So there are a number of countries that do not yet have an operational national spatial data infrastructure in place, while other countries have established their NSDI and are now incorporating the 9 strategic pathways of the UN-IGIF's Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, or the IGIF, in order to provide for new and innovative national integrated geospatial information in its broader sense. Now you have just heard from Sanjay Kumar and from Kedar about a new concept, namely the Geospatial Knowledge Infrastructure, GKI. Now, for some, this may be a bit overwhelming, particularly being so close on the heels of IGIF. So the panel today, this particular panel today, is going to try and attempt to elaborate on and clarify some of the issues on the alignment between NSDI, IGIF, and the GKI. So each panelist is going to just start with an introduction, and then after that, we will open it up for participation, for participants' discussion on that one. So thank you very much, and we start with the panel members have been introduced already by Annemieke, so I won't do it again. So we'll go straight to Rolando. Rolando, over to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Good morning. Good day. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I would like to begin this brief intervention by sharing with you that our region in Latin America and the Caribbean, like the rest of the regions of the planet, is facing a set of challenges such as the accelerated rate of the cities growth, the climate change effects, and of course, the COVID-19 impact that require an increasing support of geospatial information and knowledge. During the last 2 years in our region in ECLAC, we have been conducting a working line to strengthen geospatial information management in the countries of the region. Fundamentally, we focus on the enhancement of national process that has been developing since the early 2000s for the implementation of geospatial data infrastructure, assisting the integration of geospatial and statistical information, and promoting the geospatial support for the 2030 agenda and other drivers that high relevance, such as disaster management, especially in the Caribbean region. To carry out these works, we are pleased to have the valuable support of the new guidelines and orientation generated by the United Nations Initiative on Geospatial Information Management. Within this orientation and guidelines, I would like to highlight the immense value of the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, the IGIF, and its implementation guide and country actions plans, which provide us with a renewed and comprehensive approach with the why, the what, the who, the when, and the how to enhance the management of the geospatial information in the countries. The IGIF opens a spectrum of action that must be carried out to better respond to the demands for geospatial information that come from national development strategies, the management of public and private organizations, and the needs of citizenships, and grants the fundamental role of innovation, generation of alliance, capacity building, communication, and governments as fundamental working lines to adapt new demands connecting with the future. Today, the fourth industrial revolution places the new concepts and ways of working, such as big data, artificial intelligence, automation, smart technologies, and delivery of knowledge in real time. These new demands are conducting the transit and evolution from the original concept of geospatial data infrastructure to the concept of geospatial knowledge infrastructure, from geospatial data to geospatial knowledge, as we hear from Sanjay. The IGIF will have a fundamental role in supporting this transition from the SDIs to the geospatial knowledge infrastructure, redefining the institutional arrangements to provide better governance for this knowledge production and exchange network, promoting joint work of the public sector with the private sector and academia, opening a space for civil society participation and promoting international cooperation, among others. In Latin America and the Caribbean, the establishment of a geospatial knowledge infrastructure open a challenging path for our countries which have diverse degrees of geospatial advance. However, we are sure that the implementation of the IGIF and its strategic pathways will allow us to progress in connection with the second step. From ECLAC, we are committed to supporting these advances and supporting spreading the message for the funding the document of geospatial knowledge infrastructures in the countries of the region. With this, thank you very much, colleagues. Over to you.
Thank you, Rolando, for that introductory remarks and the perspective from your region. We go straight to Zafar for your introductory comments. Over to you.
Thank you, Derek. Hope you can all hear me. Thank you.
Yes.
I think some questions were posed to John around the SKI or spatial knowledge infrastructure. I'll start there to clarify and then tie in with the GKI. With my former ERC for spatial information, which invested into the SDIs into a spatial knowledge infrastructure, and that had colleagues working across the concepts, trying to do a transition from spatial data infrastructure to spatial knowledge infrastructure. So that is a transition of data to knowledge. And primarily that work was more reliant on the semantic web. For example, the way the spatial knowledge infrastructure was anticipated to work was like in a Google, as a visitor to Melbourne, I put in my search keywords as parks in Melbourne. So this is a text, and this text gets automatically converted into a search where it looks at geometries across the web, collates those geometries, and comes back with an integrated answer displaying a map. So this was the vision at that point of time with colleagues working on the spatial knowledge infrastructure, where we were able to take a text-based search and return as geometries across the web where this data is available. And this is a very simple example to understand the notion of SKI. And SKI is a component of GKI, as John alluded to. The GKI strength, where I see personally, is bringing across the policy elements, the elements around the technology itself, the elements across collaboration, taking advantage of the UN-IGIF framework, which was mentioned by Ronaldo previously and also mentioned by John in his presentation. So GKI is an ecosystem, in my view, that enables all these engines or components in order to make a world who have been challenged with infrastructure, challenged with data, in order to seamlessly provide this information, the data to knowledge through this particular platform. And at that point of time, while SKI work was done, the maturity of AI and ML at that point of time was more oriented towards the specialists or scientists, but now it's being used across many industries. And the maturity and acknowledging of the infrastructure i.e. the communication infrastructure has increased manifold. In Australia, at that point of time, we were talking about having a national broadband network, and today we are taking advantage of that network being rolled out, and those communication channels have matured since the SKI work, and every citizen is enjoying this national broadband connectivity. So as I said previously, the GKI presents an entire ecosystem, and SKI is one of the engines which will make GKI successful. With these comments, I would like to conclude my views. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Zafar, for those comments and for giving some background to where we are coming from. And I think this has now provided some further insights into what we are trying to achieve with GKI. We are now going to put the panelists on the line and put some questions that are going to be coming through to you. The participants are welcome now to submit their questions to the panel. To start with, I have one here which reads, when most developing countries lack basic and digital infrastructure, how can they leverage from geospatial knowledge? What can be the roadmap from them? Over to you, panel.
If I begin, I think the first or thinking in the roadmap, I think the first thing that we have to do for countries is try to align first from SDIs to IGIF, and then for geospatial knowledge infrastructure. So in our opinion, this alignment between the IGIF and the geospatial knowledge infrastructure could give us a roadmap for the countries, and based on the support provides of the IGIF strategic pathways to development this geospatial knowledge infrastructure from levels of governance, technology, and people. I think this is the first way to build this roadmap.
Zafar, from your side?
Thanks, Derek. I see the challenges around the skills itself. I refer to the recent report of the UN-IGIF, especially led by Ordnance Survey on future trends. I think I see the challenge here is the skill gaps that we would have, and the ability to produce those skills in order to understand this knowledge infrastructure space, because I think today we had a event in Australia around a mini conference, and the discussion was around AI. I think the discussion was that AI have been there for a very long time, and my fellow computer scientists across the world would really acknowledge the fact that the algorithms have been there. For example, A-star, Dijkstra, all have been there for the shortest path, networking, etc. But at that time, we were data poor to utilize the information from a common ground, from an open data infrastructure. The agencies are able to produce and publish their data boldly. And this is happening through the initiatives such as the IGIF with UN's mission and other national mapping agency opening up the data. So the data is now open. And now how do we leverage this, and what skills we have in the knowledge infrastructure to convert the data into knowledge? And that's where I think the greatest challenge is, and hopefully we as a community are able to resolve. And when I want to make a statement here, when we talk about the developing countries, I come from a developing country, from India, and when we look at it, we used to look and work across dial-up networks, still trying to have a client service architecture in the rural villages of Tamil Nadu. I'm talking about 1998. Where there is a will, there is a way. I think with shared infrastructures from country, we should be able to achieve the geospatial knowledge infrastructure, i.e. the data being hosted across by other developing countries or to be developed countries in a way that the shared infrastructure, how our state governments share the federal government infrastructure, that therewise the countries would be able to have a shared infrastructure. I understand the sensitivities around the security and other things, sovereignty, but however, in case of disaster, we as a community open up our satellite data for that disaster management and mitigation. So will be the maturity with the knowledge infrastructure that the countries are able to take advantage of the shared infrastructure if they have limited information for sharing data and infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zafar. We have a number of other questions which are very similar, I think, to what have been asked already and what have been responded to. But there is a further one here about how do we actually deal with the political leadership in now taking to them the concept of GKI when many are still struggling to get the concept of NSDI across to them. The panel?
If I take this first, I think this always a question comes across this sort of environment whenever we talk about a technology trend or a concept. I think the event of COVID, the way things are communicated is via maps, and we as a community are very small in numbers, but I think our impact is quite large. I refer to the Geospatial Media report previously, even though it is quite old. I think our industry value is about maybe $300 or $400 billion, but the impact is around $2,500 billion, around that number. I might not be accurate there. So always we have been an industry to make impacts. I think with the COVID situation, more the political leaders and the leaderships of the countries have always used cartography and digital maps as a way to communicate and manage the pandemic. I think we as a community have come together to support these sort of decisions, which has reached every home in order to understand the pandemic. You might argue, what about those countries who do not have the digital maturity? But however, the concept is that maps are important, has reached far and wider. And use this as a sort of a platform in order to say that pandemic is one angle of humanity to be saved, but there are other angles of survival that we need to use these technologies, and thereby knowledge infrastructure comes as a minimum investment to maximize the value for timely decision made by the government would be my strategy and approach to convince the leadership. Thank you.
May I say something? So during this pandemic, the COVID-19, we have seen the importance of the geospatial information, and in particular, so the application of the IGIF within the countries and the governments. So let me give you some examples. So we have seen, for example, the works that Colombia have made, the National Statistics Office of Colombia, so trying to join the information from their census and from some other information, trying to focus and identify in different areas and georeference the information for the pandemic and the cases that they have. The same case comes from Mexico. and IGIF, where they use all the information that they have from the geospatial side to incorporate it in a dashboard, and they are applying this information, and they are offering this for the decision making for the governments. And in particular, in our office in ECLAC, so for the first time, so we incorporate a geoportal just to follow, to identify the measures that countries have made in that regard. These issues and these applications could be done because of the application of the SDIs in the countries at the beginning, and during these years, the application of the IGIF, and of course, the knowledge, the geospatial knowledge infrastructure that some countries that are advanced in that regard, so they are using. So countries that are using information from the mobile companies, the cellular companies, the telephone companies, that try to apply and identify these issues. This is the way that we can identify and we can show the importance of the special information and this in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We are running out of time now for this particular panel, so I'd like to ask the panelists if they would like to add a closing remark or closing word. Zafar, to you.
Thanks, Derek. I think the message that I want to leave is that we as a spatial community have a great opportunity further to work together, not only during pandemic's time, but also in normal times to come up. And it is all about creating a positive and enduring impact on the world by using geospatial knowledge infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. I just want to reinforce the importance of the linking of geospatial information and the statistical side. So these examples that I gave you they could do it because they join the two disciplines, and this is very important for the geospatial knowledge infrastructure for the following: to use statistical information to apply it and to put it in a map, to put it in a geoportal, to put it in that. That's my closing remarks. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you to our panel members. So I suppose we could then sum up by saying that GKI is not a competitor, but a value adder onto what is already being worked on with NSDI and IGIF. So I suppose we could say we're really trying to future-proof our NSDIs and IGIF into the world of 4IR. So thank you. Hopefully the participants have benefited from this panel. Over to you, Anamika. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for conducting such an interesting panel, and really interesting to know the linkage between NSDI, IGIF, and GKI. So thanks, Derek. Our next panel is on spatial dimension to data ecosystem, foundation to geospatial knowledge infrastructure, that is GKI. Today, data ecosystem are driving data and knowledge-based economies. The spatial dimension delivers a critical or foundational component in building the power of a data ecosystem analytics and can be more nuanced and contextualized. The moderator for this panel is Greg Scott, the Interregional Advisor, UN-IGIF from United Nations. And the panelist for this panel discussion is Mr. Michael Lutz, the Digital Economy from Research Center, Tan Bun Khai, Chief Executive, Singapore Land Authority, and Mr. Carl Shapiro, the Director, Science and Decision Center from US Geological Survey. So the floor is yours, Greg. We are waiting for Greg May I request these panelists to turn on their cameras? Okay. Greg, you need to turn on your camera.
It is actually on. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I very much have it on and something's not working for some reason. So I apologize for that. Maybe we have to be cameraless.
That's fine. That's fine. So you can start the discussion.
Sorry, what was that?
You can start the discussion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I apologize for our audience for not being able to see me this morning and this afternoon and evening for many of you. In our days of COVID, I'd even got nicely dressed, so I apologize for that. We're going to extend on some of the discussion that we've just been hearing about the GKI and really this new data ecosystem. And I'm lucky to have a great panel with us that is going to talk about the spatial dimension to the data ecosystem and as a foundation to the geospatial knowledge infrastructure. So without further ado, I will offer the floor for some introductory comments from Michael Lutz from Digital Economy in the JRC. So Michael, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me today. I hope you can hear me okay, because I seem to have had some connection issues.
We can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me give you a bit the viewpoint of the European Commission on this topic, and I would like to start with mentioning some of the priorities that the new Commission under our President von der Leyen has set out at the end of last year for the need for Europe to lead the transition for a healthy planet and a new digital world. So we have in front of us this twin challenge of a green and a digital transformation that has to go hand in hand and direct us towards a more sustainable solutions that are resource efficient, critical, and climate neutral. And of course, as you all know, data is at the center of this transformation. And only by using data-driven innovation will we be able to reach the goals of the ambitious European Green Deal that is basically the priority to come to a climate-neutral continent by 2050. At the same time, we have the European Data Strategy that aims to creating a single market for data involving both private and public entities, but also trying to give the citizens full control of the data that they generate and produce. And the aim of the single market is really to allow businesses in the public sector to have easy access to a large pool of high quality data that will allow to support a variety of applications, not least in the area of AI. So as you can see, this is all very much linked and related to the topic of the GKI that we're discussing today. Currently, we're discussing at the European level to set up a number of what is called data spaces in a number of different sectors. In the public sector, supporting the European Green Deal on mobility, manufacturing, agriculture, and cultural heritage. And clearly, all of these are closely linked or related to geospatial information as well. There will be cross-cutting rules for the governance of these data spaces, as well some more practical support center to support both businesses and the public sector and citizens to ensure that there is interoperability between these different data spaces, and we're not creating new data silos in each of them. Now, there's also a number of initiatives that are aiming at supporting the European Green Deal. We are clearly aware, as I said in the beginning, that there needs to be this hand in hand of the digital and the green transition, and ICT systems, infrastructure, and data have clearly a crucial role to play in fulfilling the goals of the Green Deal. So there are two main initiatives that I would basically like to highlight today. One is to start looking at building local data ecosystems at city level to help creating climate neutral and smart communities. And it's clear that cities and local communities, both larger ones but also smaller ones, have an important part or an increasingly important part to play for reaching the goal of the climate neutrality, but also to reducing pollution, improving people's quality of life by using digital technologies and intelligent solutions. So there is the aim to build these local ecosystems involving a number of actors that are coming together. The private sector has an important role to play clearly here, but of course also the public sector and citizens as well. Also, AI will have an important role to play to enable cities to predict in a way what their citizens and the people living in the cities and communities may need in the future, not only to react to a crisis or to a situation in hindsight. And last but not least, and then also to help this predictive capacity, there is the aim to develop digital twins of cities to support this goal. Similarly, we have another project that is about to start. This is called Destination Earth, and that is aiming at building a digital twin of the Earth to having a very detailed, highly resolved model of the physical Earth system, including, of course, the oceans, the atmosphere, and then the land. In order to allow us to continuously monitor the health of the planet and to support decision making at the political level, but also to reinforce industrial and technological capabilities. Of course, this is only possible based again on high quality data coming from the data space that I mentioned before, but also it depends on the availability of very powerful infrastructure, including high performance computing and software and AI applications. So to conclude, as you've seen, a lot of the things that are happening at the political level in Europe are linked to geospatial aspects, and I'm looking very much forward to the discussion and to the recommendations coming out of the work on the geospatial knowledge infrastructure. Thank you.
From Europe right over Pacific now, and Kai as Chief Executive of the Land Authority. Tamboon, welcome.
Hi,
the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and we can see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening from Singapore to everyone, and nice to see everyone and to know that everyone is well. Let me perhaps share a little bit of my thoughts about how data, increasingly geospatial data, is playing quite a fundamental role in the changing landscape not only in Singapore, but also of the world. I think today, in the midst of COVID-19, increasingly, many countries are starting to realize the significance, the critical importance of how geospatial can help, not only in many of the past users that we have been talking about, including, for example, natural disaster, urban redevelopment, sustainability, and so on, but in future areas of trying to prevent, pandemics, trying to, see the unseen in that sense. What is before us now, and not only in Singapore, but in many other countries, including the US and Europe, is quite unprecedented. We are fighting, a battle against an unknown. We are fighting a battle against an unseen. But surprisingly, as we also know, it is something that can be mapped through the spread either of humans or of other elements. And increasingly, the real-time pinpointing of data, gives us the ability to react fast and to react efficiently in trying to contain, spreads of infections. So in Singapore, over the last couple of years, not only have we started to build an ecosystem of data, we have also started to bring together the different facets of geospatial data, which is contained at different public agencies, and created what we call a center of trust, or a trusted center, which comes under the land authority, where the responsibility is really to consolidate geotech and thereafter to proliferate these data sets, not only to public agencies, but also to the private sector. So I think at the last panel, the panelists shared that government does play a significant role, and to me, it plays an increasing role in how to bring about the collaboration, as well as how to bring about, this collection, not only within the government itself, but also with businesses, with the private sector. In the past, I've also spoken about how, because of technological changes, that geospatial is effectively democratized. It is now quite easy for each and every single person around us to be a collector, to be a sensor of geospatial information. And in Singapore, the big challenge is how to fuse all these multitudes of data sets together, so that you have a very rich data set, which forms the base upon which you can put GKI on. It is an ongoing work, and it is an ongoing work simply because as each day passes, you realize that there's more and more things that you can layer upon. The next job that we are trying to look at is how to layer geospatial data with real-time action data on the ground, so that actually it forms a holistic set of data, which you not only use as a reference point for the day itself, but also for future. I mean, Singapore, at the end of the day, is a small country. We are very much constrained. And I think you can also see from some of the stats that we have as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, that in a dense country, spreads of infection happen very fast, very quickly. But how we visualize and how we use those collected data is quite important. We are embarking on an ongoing effort, not only to have government as the facilitator, but also a player working with not only just businesses, as well as private citizens, to create this holistic environment. So that's something that I think is very exciting going forward. It's not something that is easily achievable, but I think if you tap onto each and every single party around, things do become more fulfilling. The other ending thought that I should say is that right at the moment, a lot of our data sets are still quite territorial in the sense of being country specific. Through the GKI and through efforts by geospatial media, we should actually look at how we can bring multitude of worldwide data sets together. So these, of course, include having to resolve issues such as open standards, consistency, the consistency not only in collection but consistency in standards. And I think this is a worthwhile venture which should be pursued, so that ultimately everywhere you are around in the world, you'll be able to leverage on consistent similar data sets to be able to embark on analytical functions. Thanks.
Did get a breakage there in some of your relation, but certainly the myth was there. And I think sometimes it's the advantage of having cameras off, is we conserve bandwidth for those that are speaking. So I have turned my camera off again. Thank you. And I think we did get the gist of at the start, you were talking about the significance of geospatial information and how it's maturing, and that certainly became a situation and a reality as we've gone through the COVID process. And just how has been more democratized, but
I think there is some issue with connection on Greg's side. So maybe we can request Carl to give his views. Carl, you are muted. Can you please unmute yourself? Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, from just outside of Washington, D.C. In the U.S. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Geospatial Media and its partners for convening this important workshop. I think the topic of geospatial knowledge infrastructure is critical to our ability to more successfully and more effectively utilize geospatial data and turn it into information and knowledge as we go there. So I think today's discussion is a very good, a very important effort along the journey of moving in this direction. I want to start with talking a little bit about how this aligns with USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, which is a earth science agency in the U.S. that focuses on geology, hydrology, and geography, and water resources, as well as biological issues. Our mission, the USGS mission, which I believe takes us right to GKI, our mission is to provide reliable scientific information. However, there's more to it than just providing the information. We have to provide the information to minimize loss of life and property from natural disasters. We have to manage water, biological, energy, and mineral resources. And we don't do it ourselves. We provide the science to get us there. And finally, in a very broad sense, to enhance and protect our quality of life. All of these factors require geospatial knowledge in order to do this. And the concept of GKI is important to enhance our ability to accomplish this mission more effectively. I want to talk about 4 specific issues that USGS is involved in that I believe relate to GKI and are important to understand for us and how we can more effectively benefit from GKI in accomplishing our mission. The first is, in 2017, the USGS held a Grand Challenges workshop looking at grand challenges for integrated USGS science. And how do we more effectively provide our biology, our geology, our hydrology, and geography to enhance our nation's and the world's ability to address very challenging and long-standing issues. Out of that workshop came a concept of Earth Map. And Earth Map is a focus, it's a priority for USGS now, of doing some of the things that are discussed in GKI. And we are working on this concept of how can we more effectively provide integrated information in a more timely fashion that is looking at predictions and looking at ability to inform critical challenges that the world is facing. And for more information on this, we have a publication. It's USGS Open File Report 2017-1076. The second topic that I want to mention is something that we call the multi-resource analysis. And USGS has historically done resource assessments, natural resource assessments, looking at energy resources and mineral resources. And traditionally, we've looked at these resources one at a time. What is the resource availability for oil in a certain area? And the multi-resource analysis is a concept that has been developed to how can we combine and integrate this. If we disturb one natural resource, it's going to affect other natural resources. And just as importantly, it's going to have a number of societal issues. There are going to be social consequences, there are going to be economic consequences, and we need to be thinking about all of these issues as we assess what our natural resources are like and what the impacts on sustainability can be expected to be. So all of these are important issues. More information about the the multi-resource analysis is available at USGS Circular number 1442, which summarizes the concept. A third area that we believe is very important to GKI relates to crowdsourcing and citizen science. The issue of that we need to be thinking about where our data comes from. And all of our geospatial data does not come just from sensors. We need to be looking at innovative ways and looking at open innovation efforts to look at how can we use crowdsourcing more effectively to complement the geospatial data that we have, and how can we integrate that with other geospatial data to create information and knowledge that can be used. And so the concept of crowdsourcing and citizen science and innovative new ways of data gathering are very important to us as we think about GKI. And we're in the process now of developing a USGS strategy for moving forward in citizen science and crowdsourcing. An example of our crowdsourcing efforts is we have a program called Did You Feel It in the USGS, and whenever there's an earthquake, we receive thousands of citizen and crowdsourced responses on where they felt an earthquake. And so this adds a real-time component to our extensive sensor networks of seismic networks that we have. And again, this is an important part of our vision of how something like GKI needs to be enhanced and to be implemented going forward. And finally, the issue of societal benefits is very important. We need to understand how GKI and how geospatial data, knowledge, and information are actually used, and what are the impacts to society of having the availability of GKI, and what happens if we have it or if we don't have it, and can we quantify it in some cases in social terms or in economic terms. And USGS has been involved in an international group called GeoValue, which looks at the societal benefits of geospatial information and Earth observations. And how can we better understand and assess what are the potential benefits of having GKI as we move forward. And so we believe this broad partnership that's being developed for GKI includes not just people who are understanding geospatial information, but it includes social scientists and economists and a broad set of partners in going forward with that. And with that, I'd like to turn this back to Greg, and I thank you again for convening today's session.
Thank you, Carl. I think hopefully you can hear me, understand from some images that have come from colleagues. It is in fact me that is the problem today. So I am breaking up more than others are breaking up. I think everyone else can be heard very, very clearly. So I apologize for that. And hopefully I can be heard okay now. And if you can just confirm me with that, Anamika, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
okay.
now it's fine.
Excellent. We just heard some very some interesting presentations from our team of experts here that have covered many dimensions from in this data ecosystem, and I guess some element of this is context of data being from local to global. In fact, in this growing data ecosystem, cities are certainly going to be a key element of our geospatial world going forward, and they start at very good level. And Tam Kai gave a very good example of this in Singapore and the nature of the COVID environment. But it's also reaching out more broadly to the global aspects when we think about health of the planet, but we also think about other actors and processes that come in place around citizen science and crowdsourcing and all of these other areas about integrating science and data and information and technology and the benefits that need to be demonstrated to go with that. And I guess my question for the panel is in the context of GKI and the fourth industrial revolution, is how you see or what role technologies and innovation play as we grow this data ecosystem adoption into the future. Just some key aspects from your perspectives on how this would be, how the fourth industrial revolution, how industry provides more opportunity for us in the data ecosystem. Perhaps I can start. I'll start with Carl first. So we'll go from the last to the first. So Carl, just your quick thoughts, please.
Okay, thanks, Greg. I think my reaction is that this fourth industrial revolution creates opportunities that we never dreamt of. I'm old enough that I go back to when we first started doing some of these analysis many years ago. We had a Mylar sheet, and we, on a very slow and methodical basis, had to record the geospatial coordinates of where different data attributes occurred. And now with this new information revolution we have, we can consolidate and integrate and use data sets from multiple sources, from multiple scales that we never dreamt of in the past. So I think very briefly that this gives us tremendous new opportunities to assimilate and integrate information from multiple sources and to use it more effectively and in a more timely way to address critical societal challenges.
Thanks, Carl. Tam Kai, your thoughts, please.
I actually fully agree with Carl on what he said, but I do qualify also that in the midst of trying to gain deeper insights into the quality of geospatial data and information that we have, I think there's a question on the somewhere on the chat that reminds us that we do need to talk about policies, the regulation, data privacy issues that cannot be neglected. It is something that I think all countries are struggling with. Where do you draw the line between data, how intrusive it might be, the privacy of and rights of individuals, versus how do you use and enhance those data for the public good? So many countries are now, as we talk about, again, using the example of COVID, having trace technologies that is able to locate individuals where they are. Where do you draw the line of what you share, what you don't share, as well as not only that, what you put out in the public domain? So as technology goes ahead, we are always reminded that the last thing that you should impede is over-regulation. But at the same time, I think we are now entering an age where regulation needs to be quite clearly articulated before it spirals a little bit out of control. Because as the human population becomes much more educated, as rights become more prevalent, we must have safeguards so that many of these are not abused.
Okay, I think Greg has still issues with the connection, so I'll just add my thoughts on top of the ones we've just heard. I think the fourth industrial revolution does not alone drive the change. It's true that we have a lot of opportunities here with all the data that is being generated by sensors and all the computing power that we have to analyze them. But if we look at what is being generated by the Internet of Things today, it's still very heavily fragmented and locked into different vendor platforms and so on, and interoperability between the different standards that are used by the different producers and providers is still a monumental issue. So in a way, I think change will only happen if we manage to connect and work together with or make all the different platforms and systems work together, and I think we're starting again onto a new interoperability challenge here. One other, maybe even bigger issue is the question of ownership and licensing of data. And it's the big question of who owns the data that is being produced by a sensor on an industrial machine. Is it the producer of the machine? Is it the owner of the machine? Is it the operator? I mean, it's all these kind of unsolved questions that are a big question mark at the moment, especially if you look at very complex supply chains where and machines are being used by
so I think so we have
a whole
lost
lot, but also where producers possible, the more data and time it will have, so it becomes more and more difficult the better we get at the technology.
Annemieke, I'm going to take this opportunity just to thank Michael, Bunkai, and Carl. I pretty much have the last 5 minutes or so. I think the fourth industrial revolution is not quite working in New York City for me just at this moment. So I apologize for this. I think it's one of these days where in New York there's suddenly a big demand, and for me at the moment I'm having struggles. So apologize profusely for that to everyone, in particular to my panel colleagues, and I thank you for your contributions. And Annemieke, before I drop out again, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg, and I definitely agree with you on your comments that lots more to be done for fourth industrial revolution to get connected in New York. So thank you, Greg, for such a stimulating discussion on the spatial dimension to the data ecosystem, converging on a platform to provide knowledge intelligence and understanding of complex problems that evolve, that is what, where, when, who, how, and why, these kind of questions. So our next panel discussion will delve upon getting the most out of the GKI, wherein the scope of partnership needs to be broadened to include the entire knowledge value chain from sensors to citizens. And for this panel, the moderator is, oh, you have been hearing her from the beginning. So to give the name to the face, she's Anamika Das, Vice President, Professional Geospatial Market, Geospatial Media and Communications. And the panelists for this session are Vasanta Shrestha, the Director of Strategic Cooperation, International Center for ECMODE, that is the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development from Nepal. Albert Momo, Vice President and Executive Director, Emerging Markets and Funded Projects from Trimble. Paul Jansen, Geostandardization Expert, Social Engineering from GeoNovum, Netherlands. With this, I welcome all my panelists on floor. Well, we have seen in the presentation of GKI by John as one of the very key elements of GKI's collaborations and partnerships. And partnership sometimes is difficult and really needs a kind of common purpose to come together and work for a purpose. And the derivation of knowledge and value from integration of analytics and information and disruption through integrating new technologies. And two such purposes that I can think of are these. And it may also be that collaboration brings separate different benefits to both the parties, perhaps through data exchange or maybe beyond. So let's have the views of our panelists on the topic, collaborative approach towards building geospatial knowledge infrastructure. So let's start with Paul.
Well, thank you, Anamika, and thank you all for inviting me to speak in this interesting webinar. Well, foremost, my introductory remarks on this subject. I think, of course, collaboration is key related to this subject, but also the concept of the GKI, the geospatial knowledge infrastructure, is far too complex to be realized with only a few companies or only a few organizations. So we need this global cooperation. But also, in fact, the infrastructure or data infrastructure by itself is a collaborative concept by definition. And the GKI is about connecting data to data, connecting data to people, information to people, machine to machine, machine to people, etc., etc. So this connection aspect is key again, and this connection has to take place at all geographical levels. So it needs to be organized at a local level, a national level, and of course also at the global level. Otherwise, data exchange won't work across all those networks. And well, and if you talk about this institutional collaboration, all these levels are relevant. So connection at local, national, and international level, collaboration at all those levels. I myself, I'm a geostandards expert, and I think a typical collaboration platform is standardization, and the platform that is organized by international standardization organizations, like there is the ISO, like there is the OGC, like there is also now the W3C, which also gets interested in the geospatial domain. And well, that standardization platform is important to access and to operate on. This geospatial infrastructure includes the geodomain in this standardization platform, but it also strongly relates to other innovative techniques. So it's not only about geo anymore. It's also about, well, using the infrastructure that is provided by the World Wide Web, of course, and the technologies that go along with that. And but it also relates a lot to, we've heard that as examples, like it relates to the Internet of Things and technologies that are the level of technology that's coming from that side. It also relates to artificial intelligence, and as an upcoming new discipline that has a changing role and in the potential of location. Well, to achieve this, the GI communication has not to look inward, but has to look outward and to reach out to these domains. Again, a factor of collaboration. But in fact, we are doing that already. We have done that with the spatial data infrastructure. We have done that with the phase before, the GIS information systems, and we are doing that now even more with this geo knowledge infrastructure. And strategically, this also operates on the level of we see that in practice between strategic agreements between ISO and OGC and the International Hydrographical Institute and the W3C and all their, of course, liaison partners. So that's for the standardization platform or point of view. But of course, there's also the public. As remarked already by other speakers, the citizen has also become an important source of information. It has become an important factor of importance in the gathering of information. And citizen sciences and crowdsourcing through IT platform are increasingly becoming important. They provide big data, which through analytics become information. Examples of citizen science and crowdsourcings that I know are, for instance, air quality measurements that were executed by citizens in the Netherlands, and I've seen examples from that in Belgium. Those citizens participating in air quality measurements, they have cheap sensors, cheap devices, but they are very numerous. So they add an extensive network of sensors to the sensors that are already there. So to conclude, collaboration is key in this aspect because the concept is far too big to do it by entities by itself, and standardization is an important platform to take advantage of.
Thanks, Paul. May I request Basanta to share his views? Basanta, you are on mute, I believe.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Anamika. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good day, good evening to all the colleagues here. It's my privilege to be a part of this August panel and this webinar. We are talking about geospatial knowledge infrastructure for society, for economy, for environment, and I think we are in the midst of digital age and industrial revolution, as been alluded earlier. And also what we are seeing is a wave of the pervasiveness of these technologies, and if you look at from the development angle, SDG, you know, if you look at it, all goal 17, no one left behind. So how we can really embrace all this wave of new emergence of new technologies and innovation to the effective solution that can transform their lives and livelihood. Having said this, I think if you look at from the citizen science point of view, everyone is a producer and everyone is a consumer of information. We have a notion that citizen kind of information. But to give more concrete example from the collaboration and the partnership point of view, I just would like to give example from ICIMOD and
I think so. Basanta's, we have lost Basanta's connection. So maybe we can go ahead with Albert in the meantime. You are muted. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Anamika, and thank you, everyone, and hello from Washington, D.C.
Sorry, I got disconnected. And visible, or maybe, you know, if somebody has, I see Albert here, if Albert has gone ahead, please, or I can.
Yeah, we have asked Albert to go ahead.
Okay, so Basante or me?
Albert, you can go ahead.
Anamika.
Okay, Basante, hopefully you will have your turn then. So I want to look at the collaboration through three different angles. The first one is user engagement. The idea here is we have three groups in general when it comes to geospatial knowledge and information. So the first group is the public sector, and I will include international agencies to that group too. So the public sector is one group. The second group is the private sector, and the third one will be the general public. And one thing that we have to see here and to understand here is the fact that each of the groups can be at some point user and at other point producer. So the user engagement will be to make sure that whatever we try to implement, that we have the user, that is always user-centric, that we have the user in mind. And the public sector and the international organizations, so when they act as a producer, we will see, you know, mapping agencies, land authorities. So they will send out data and information that can be used by either the private sector or the general public. And the private sector, of course, we will do sensors, or we will generate data and knowledge that can be used both by the public sector or the users. And the users also, like I say, can be producer themselves. And people mention crowdsourcing, which is a way for the general public to act as a producer. But we are also, of course, all of us, the three groups, we are also users. You know, we can use information or data coming from any other users. We can and we should always collaborate, right? And when you have collaboration between, let's say, public sector and private sector, that's what we call PPP, public-private partnership, where we join forces to produce information or data that can be used by the general public. So those combinations can always exist. So user engagement is making sure that whatever we are developing, whatever we are producing, we have the user in mind, is user-centric. So that was the first one. And with the user engagement comes what we call the needs assessment. A need assessment here is we don't want people to work in silos. We want people to be able, we want to go after people and say, what is it that you really need? And in order to implement the geospatial knowledge information, we need more needs assessment activities. So meaning that we need to find ways to have more participatory engagement. And I mean, a discussion like this one is an example of how we can go to people, we can talk to people to understand exactly what is it that they need, so that whatever we end up producing is actually to give something that people need, that people are going to use. So I really want to emphasize on the user engagement aspect, the need assessment, and the third one, and I will conclude with that. The third one is how do we measure success? So we have NSDI, we have now geospatial knowledge information, we have IGIF, we have a lot of other things. So how do we measure the success of the implementation of the geospatial knowledge information? And that, for me, is probably where we still have a lot of work to do. So are we going to focus only on readiness, where we actually look at countries and say, and put them on a scale and say, this is how ready, each of the countries are, and, that was the approach with NSDI, or are we going to have a more participatory and also a more knowledgeable approach, which is to set up standard, to set up indicators to measure the success. And when you say indicators, that means you need to have a baseline. So where do we start? What is it that we're trying to measure? And how often do we want to measure that? And how often do we want to come up with some corrective actions in order to make sure that geospatial knowledge infrastructure is a success? So those are my preliminary thoughts on the topic. And thank you, Anamika.
Thanks, Albert. Basant, are you there? Okay.
Am I audible? I'm visible?
Yes. Yes.
Can I start from where I stop?
Yeah.
Perhaps
Yes.
very briefly from the institutional point of view, as a knowledge center, we give very much prominence to geospatial information and knowledge to support our sustainable development agenda. Now, we see this in the context of partnership and broader collaboration, and brings together partnership of 8 regional member countries, and we view that how geospatial information and knowledge can really support sustainable decision making in varieties of issues like climate change, disaster risk reduction, agriculture, biodiversity, and many different applications. Now, in terms of a collaboration, we have partnership we see in 4 streams. One is from the data itself, given the data is scarce region and also the sensitivity of a data sharing. So how do we really bring these countries together? How do we really bring different actors together? So the government, the private sectors, and all actors for the collaboration to have a data-rich environment. Second is more from the capacity point of view. Unless I think we have data and analytics and all this kind of a technological solution. So how can we really empower local organizations, the government authorities, and many different stakeholders? Again, if you look at these are the multi-sector collaboration and the partnership itself. Now, if you look at from other angle applications, so when we talk about disaster risk reduction, or just to give an example of a Nepal earthquake, where we have mobilized a lot of international and national and regional partners to emergency response. So I think in terms of developing the kind of applications and empower the community to use geospatial information and the knowledge kind of thing. The other kind of a stream in terms of partnership and a collaboration that we see is how we can create an enabling framework, the policy environment, in terms of data, in terms of, the enabling kind of a framework, standards, and others at the national level and the regional level and so forth. So I think I would see that ICIMO brings together these different multiple actors to provide kind of a platform, or if you like a regional kind of a platform to address some of the impending challenges using some of the geospatial knowledge infrastructure and so forth. So I'll just stop here, perhaps take at a later stage some other points.
Thank you, Basanta. I think so. We are through with the time, but then I'll have one question for each panelist, which will be a kind of closing comment for them. So this question goes to Basanta. What kind of institutional arrangements support collaborative geospatial data exchange that you foresee?
One that we are also seeing from, from the private sector growth point of view, the plethora of the satellite data that we have seen today, I think that's the one driving force. The second, I would say, is a citizen science, the kind of different applications that are emerging, and with the penetration of the mobile devices and IoTs and others, So we see another kind of a very much driving, if you look at this part of the region, demographic dividend that we have with the youth population and others. I think that's a major other driving force. The third part, I also would say that the young innovators, the young entrepreneurs and others, they are also driving the force and coming up with a very, very innovative solutions. And I believe we can leapfrog from the current stage in terms of use of geospatial knowledge and information in our society to make the real difference. For example, even looking at some of the customization of the Uber, or even if you look at the Tootle, that is a motorcycle Uber in Kathmandu Valley, and many other examples that we see on agriculture, the biodiversity, the climate change, and others. And I think these four IR is providing real impetus, and I think we need to focus on this real young entrepreneurs and the youth to make a real difference.
Thank you, Basanta. So the question to Paul. According to you, what kind of potential partnership could help move national geospatial agencies up the knowledge value chain?
Yeah, well, first, was my microphone on when I gave my introductory presentation?
Yes, it was.
Good. Because I was wondering on that. Bringing those national geospatial agencies up the value chain. I think one important aspect is relating more to the industrial platforms that are provided by social media and search engines. I think if governmental agencies would relate more to those big data providing, but also providing analytics, data analytics technologies. If we would do that more, then we make a step from data into information area. So from data infrastructures to knowledge and information structures. So I think that there is an important part to gain over there. But that means that we have to trust those, most of the time commercial or private platforms, and so that there will be an element of trust between, both of those entities.
Thanks, Paul. So Albert, your closing remarks that we would like to understand is, how will a transition of GKI affect the service offerings of geospatial technology providers, and how will technology providers adapt to the changes?
Yeah, thank you, Anamika. And yes, the geospatial providers are always leading the challenge of adapting to new environment, and to also integrate new technologies and integrate new ideas to the way we deliver our products and services. So one way of seeing this is, as everybody's working on now is geospatial as a service. So can we instate, and we see that like Paul was talking about sensors, and I think Basante too, we can have ways where instead of always just procuring stuff directly, we have us as geospatial entities, as geospatial private sector companies, providing some of the services that the general public wants, or the government or the public sectors want as a service. And that's, for me, what the direction that we're taking for a lot of geospatial survey products. So instead of selling imagery, instead of selling total stations, instead of selling any type of hardware, we are moving more and more into the arena where we are actually providing services. And the idea of collaboration is even more important when we start thinking about services rather than a one-off self-operation. So and the collaboration, like I mentioned, between the public sector and the private sector under some PPPs, we allow not only the government and the private sector to deliver a better service to the general public, because the partnership is on a long run. It's not a one-off operation. So that's, for me, what the direction of the collaboration and the direction of how geospatial will be served in the future.
Thank you all. Thank you all panelists for joining us today. With this, we come to an end of this webinar, a very interesting session which brought out an understanding on geospatial knowledge infrastructure, that is GKI, its value proposition, relevance, and connectivity with the fundamentals of next generation economy and society. With this, I thank all the participants of the webinar and the speakers, panelists, and moderators for an interesting discussions. There were many questions definitely asked, which we could not take up during the webinar due to the constraint of time, but we'll definitely think through them when working on the finalization of the report. Well, this is not an end, rather a beginning. So we'll see you all again in our next webinar, which ranges from technology integration to policy to application. So have a good day or good night, depending on where your location is. So ciao, namaste, and bye.